Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us tonight to meet the candidates for House District 16 in Town Council. I'm Susan Dong, a member of the Wyoming League of Women Voters. Tonight's forum is sponsored by the Wyoming League of Women Voters, the Teton County Library, Jackson Hole News and Guide, Jackson Hole Community Radio, KHOL 89.1, Buck Rail, and Wildfire. We're going to begin the evening with the candidates for House District 16, Jim McCullum and Mike Yin. A fun icebreaker question will be asked to give our voters an insight into their personalities. Following the icebreaker question, our media panel will ask our get down to business questions. Each candidate will answer the question on a rotating basis, so they each have a chance to go first. We are very fortunate tonight because tonight's media panel consists of Sophie Boyd-Flegal of Jackson Hole News and Guide and Carolyn Chapman from Buck Rail. Dee Buckstaff, a League of Women Voters member, is our timekeeper. She'll indicate when time is running out. Each candidate also has 2 red cards to use at any time. The red card can be used as the candidate sees fit to refute, clarify, or doesn't have to be used at all. The audience, you, can also submit questions via note cards, which will be collected by Sandy Ship-Prime, a League of Women Voter member, who will give them to the media panel to be added to their questions. So Sandy, stand up and thank you. She has cards for you. At the end of the media questioning, candidates will have 1 minute to summarize and present closing remarks. Then around 6:45 p.m. we'll start our forum discussion for Town Council. So let's start with an icebreaker question from Carolyn to Mike Yin.
All right. Please state your name, your job, and what's made you uniquely prepared to serve.
My name's Mike Yin. I'm a software developer. That's my day job. And uniquely prepared to serve. That feels deep. You know, I think it's just those that have the desire to serve should be the ones that put their hat in the ring. And so just having that desire, I know lots of candidates have it, but I guess that doesn't make it unique, but I'll put that out there.
Same question? Mm-hmm. My name is Jim McCollum. Can you repeat the question?
Please state your name, your job, and what's made you uniquely prepared to serve.
Is the green light?
No. I failed.
Did we kill it already?
Do over.
Testing. My name is Jim McCollum, cowboy carpenter poet. What makes me unique for this job, I am a Jackson local, born and raised. Raised my kids here as a single dad. I love the community, love the state, very passionate about both. And I want to see positive changes that we just haven't had in many years. That's the biggest reason I jumped into the race is we got to make changes, and whether it starts at library board, school board, hospital board, I jumped into this one, and that's why I'm running.
Thank you both. We are starting with a question on abortion. What restrictions, if any, should be imposed on abortion in Wyoming?
Who goes first?
Jim Adams will answer first.
The overturning that the Supreme Court did, I think, is proper because it gives it back to the states. The voters should have a right in each state. But ultimately, that choice is up to the woman. Regardless of what my beliefs are, I don't have a right to dictate what a woman does and what her decision is going to be. Whether it conflicts with my own moral beliefs or not, that's not my decision to make.
So, you know, because I forgot to thank everyone, I'll quickly do that. Thank you, League of Women Voters, the Teton County Library, the Jackson Hole News and Guide, KHOL, Buck Rail, and Wildfire, and then we'll dive into the abortion question. You know, right now, abortion is a decision in the states. I don't think it ever should have been a decision that should be state by state. It needs to be one decision that covers the entire state, and frankly, that decision should be that women have the right to choose how they deal with their own body. The decision of Roe v. Wade basically made a viability limit, and that's how Wyoming had its law for about 50 years until last year. It's still currently the way, it currently is that limit right now because of the pending court case. And frankly, I think this is an issue that Teton County needs to be united on its front on, that everyone and every representative that we elect in Teton County has that strong voice that says it is a women's right to choose, because it's not going to stop just at the lawsuit. It's going to continue in this next session. It's going to continue in the following session, and making sure that we have that united voice when we go to the rest of the state and say, this is the way, these are the rights that should be enshrined. It's just that strong of a position where we all need to say the same voice right there.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Okay, so we have one yes or no question. After you answer that, we'll ask 2 follow-ups. First, the yes or no. Do you believe the 2020 presidential election was stolen?
No.
No, but there were irregularities that definitely need to be looked into.
Okay, and the 2 follow-ups. How will you work with those who think the opposite? And do you think Wyoming needs to change the way it runs its elections?
I think this question is a little focused on who is probably the presumptive Secretary of State, which would be Representative Gray, currently elected representative from Natrona County, who basically campaigned on the fact that Wyoming's elections are run poorly, which is frankly not a fact. I've worked with former Clerk Daigle, I work with Clerk Murphy. Every single one of them have done a great job. All of the clerks I met around the state do a great job with our elections. I do think that elections are a work in progress. I mean, there are things that we should work on that create systematic effects on who our representatives are. Does that mean that the way that ballots were counted in Wyoming were bad, or around the state, or around the country were bad? No, I mean, it's a conspiracy theory that has been used to win elections, and that's an attack on democracy itself, and is something that we need to push back on across the state.
Can you please repeat the second part of that question?
Absolutely. How will you work with those who think the opposite? And do you think Wyoming needs to change the way it runs its elections?
I think Wyoming's doing a fantastic job with our elections. I had a conversation with the Secretary of State in Rock Springs a couple months ago. It was basically a presentation for him to debunk all the myths that have been out there. And I learned a lot about how Wyoming's process works and just how secure it is. Again, the conversation and the dialogue has to be open to, you've got people on both sides extremely passionate about, was it stolen, was it not stolen? Is it just a conspiracy theory? But if you look across the country, there were a lot of irregularities that shouldn't have taken place. COVID played a big part in that, and it was ripe for not necessarily fraud, but ballots that shouldn't have been cast, voter rolls that should have been cleared, and it's brought to light a bunch of those issues. And those are the conversations we need to have, is just clean up what we can and move forward and keep cybersecurity is another huge one. We got to get away from everybody's cheating all the time and get rid of that mindset, I think, is the biggest thing, and focus on what we're doing right and expand that.
Thank you. The next question comes from Sophie, and Jim will answer it first.
So you both cited energy as a top concern. Mr. McCollum, you have said you wanted to see an energy transition that is environmentally friendly, cost-effective, and clean. Representative Yin, you have an energy startup trying to place EV chargers across the state. For you both, what's going to be the biggest legislative barrier to the state's transition to clean energy? How will you mount that challenge?
The biggest problem with our energy right now, the way I see it, is the affordability and the cleanliness, and moving forward with technology that that we can still harness the energy that we have, which is the backbone of our economy, but do it in a way that is environmentally friendly with the least amount of impact. And the electric vehicle thing, we're putting the cart before the horse, and we're really jumping through hoops to get there. Right now, I think it's 27% of our carbon footprint is vehicle, transportation. Right behind that is electricity. So if you turn everything into an electric vehicle, and the average household has 2 vehicles, and you plug them all in, we're only swapping a little bit. You might save a little bit on the carbon footprint, but you're not changing much, and you're putting undue burdens on the electrical grid as it is, and we're seeing those issues in California right now. I'm all for cleaner energy, better ways to do it. How can we clean up our natural gas, coal? Let's look at the nuclear option. But to just absolutely shift over to electric is counterproductive, and we're getting way ahead of ourselves without seeing the catastrophic outcome that could come from that.
I think the biggest struggle that the state has when it comes to energy transitions is not listening to what the market has said. I mean, I think it's clear that transition is coming. The question is, do we want to pursue the opportunities before us when it comes to the transition, or are we going to continue trying to prop up what is an industry that's in decline? I mean, I definitely recognize where it is in our revenue standpoint in the state, and I want to understand what communities want to do for the future. But if the only future is subsidizing an energy industry, I mean, that's not going to cut it. We cut $10 million in taxes in the severance tax for specifically the coal severance tax. If we're not even making money from coal, oil, and gas, why are we as a state continuing to prop it up? So for me, it's focusing on how do we dive into local communities, see what they want to pursue, help them pursue it. I think there's a transitional plant in Kemmerer that is looking at an experimental reactor. That's one that the community actually asked for. So finding opportunities that communities ask for, that they want to build a workforce on, I think it's very important. But I think trying to prop up something where the market has spoken is not one that is fiscally responsible, to be frank.
Thank you. The next question will come from Carolyn, and Mike will answer first.
In Teton County, one of the most popularly cited solutions to our housing shortage is passing a real estate transfer tax. Mr. Yin, you've shepherded related bills further along in the House than we've ever been. What would you do, or what would you change this year to get the bill over the finish line?
So, I mean, all of that's a conversation. I don't think citing one specific thing will be something that is that I can sell to every legislator. We're going to have at least 27 new legislators this upcoming year just in the House alone. So it really is a discussion of, to each of those legislators personally, what they're comfortable with, how much local control versus taxation makes sense, right? So where counties decide to vote on it themselves. So each of those parameters, when it comes to that bill and adjusting it to win each individual vote, is important, but the only way you get that is having that discussion with each individual legislator and figuring out where their positions are and their comfort level with any form of taxation. And so I think that's what it's going to take. It's going to take more discussion with those new legislators to figure out what they're willing to work with and work on, and then also understand that something that we want in our community could be adjusted in ways that work in their communities too. And so it's figuring out what sort of bill works as a solution for other problems in other communities.
Repeat the question. In Teton County, one of the most popularly cited solutions to our housing shortage is passing a real estate transfer tax. Would you continue to carry this bill?
I'm opposed to the transfer tax, the real estate transfer tax. It's regressive and it's somewhat discriminatory. And we're going to hurt the very people we're trying to help. It's the lower end houses that are going to sell most frequently, and those are the people that are going to get taxed most. There are other avenues to come up with revenue, and Jackson's become a city of no. No, we're not going to do this. No, we're not going to try that. No, that won't work. Well, the answer is always no unless you jump in and you say, hey, let's try this. Let's think about this. There's options to make money. At the forum yesterday, I mentioned a couple. One, in 1 year, you make approximately $235 million on a 3% tax on ski passes that could go for nothing but affordable housing. Last November, November 21, we had 6 straight months of record-setting sales tax. Figure out how to take a percentage of the sales tax and turn that into affordable housing, and you gain another $7 million. That's $40 to $44 million in 1 year revenue that could be earmarked for nothing but affordable housing. And we don't look big enough, and we've been so constrained into the old way of thinking. We've got to be more innovative and come up with better ideas, and the money's out there.
Okay, I want to stay here since we've got some division. Representative Yin, Mr. McCullum just said that the real estate transfer tax would be regressive and brought up sales tax, which is popularly cited as one of the most regressive taxes as a solution. Do you have a response?
So, you know, the real estate transfer tax is a sales tax. It is a form of sales tax basically on real estate transactions. The way that the bill that I crafted that got through the committee has an exemption for houses of an adjustable amount, depending on the community, of houses up to $1.5 million. So if taxing after the first $1.5 million is regressive, then I don't know how I can see that as regressive. But if we increase sales tax, that is going to be something that affects everyone, especially everyone who buys a season pass. So whether it's an employer who buys a season pass or an individual who buys a season pass, that's going to be a tax that each of our locals pay. Sales tax generally is one of the tools that we do have because it's one of the few options the state has allowed us. So it is one that tourists generally pay. However, if you want to prevent from making it regressive, you just ensure that the ones that who make the least income, which generally are the ones that own the lowest property value homes, are exempt from those real estate transfer taxes. So, for example, we don't have a food tax, but that is one that the legislature has considered putting back. A food sales tax, which would be the most regressive form of sales tax that we could possibly have, because every single one of us has to eat. While at the same time, the richest among us don't spend the same proportion of their money on food.
I'm not suggesting that we add an additional sales tax. This is record-breaking sales tax with the rate that it is now. The money's there. It's basically, for lack of a better word, it's free money. The money is there. And if we're setting records in our sales tax, take a portion of that. This housing thing has become a crisis, and it started in the mid-90s and it hasn't slowed down. We've just never looked forward enough to make the proper changes and forward thinking enough to fix the problem as we saw it coming. The ski pass, that is about the only tax that I am in favor of, and it would be a minimal 3% tax on ski, 1% to 3%. It's a service basically that is untaxed. And if you look back over the years on that untaxed service, you have people that have to take care of the ski industry every day, but we're basically giving it to them for free. And again, it's going to be, by and large, it's the visitors that come to Teton County and buy those ski passes, and they're not going to stop coming. That minimal tax isn't going to keep them from buying a ski pass, but good grief, we're losing a ton of money by not looking into this. Again, the answer is always no. Let's look at finding the way to say yes.
Thank you both.
Carolyn?
All right, on to health insurance. Tell us why you think Wyoming hasn't expanded Medicaid, and what would you do to help the uninsured?
I think the hospitals have a lot to say in the Medicaid expansion. And I've been looking into this the last couple months, and there are things that I see where it does make sense, that their argument does make sense. The people that are buying health insurance right now, when Medicaid is expanded, then they would just simply drop their insurance, and then that burden would come on, become the hospital. There's a lot of things in there that I need to dissect. I'm in favor of it on its face. We definitely have to insure the citizens of our communities and across the state better than we have. We also need to look into, shopping for insurance across state lines. Anything we can do to help get our uninsured insured. And I'm dealing with this problem right now with my daughter. She's not making enough to actually purchase her own insurance, but she makes too much to qualify for Medicaid as it is, as it stands. So we've got to find solutions to that. And I do believe expansion is probably the best bet at this moment. And again, it's just conversations across the state that have to be made.
So the first part of the question is, why hasn't Wyoming done it before? I think the biggest thing there is partisan politics, frankly, because Medicaid expansion became an option in the Affordable Health Care Act, which happened under a Democratic president. Several Republican states have been the ones most reticent to expand it. The Medicaid expansion population is 100% to 130% of the federal poverty level. And those are the types of people who work the retail jobs, that work in this town, that work at the rest of your food restaurants, your fast food restaurants. They're the ones that fit in this Medicaid expansion population. And many of them right now do not have health insurance. So it's not going to be that they have health insurance and they're going to drop it. They can't afford to buy health insurance now. So that Medicaid expansion population will not only ensure that we give people preventative care to make sure they don't have catastrophic care that will be uncompensated and the hospital will have to pick up and then pass on as healthcare costs to the rest of us that are insured, but it will also just make sure that we don't have to bear more of that cost, and we can take in federal tax dollars at the same time, which not only will help that Medicaid expansion population, but will work to help the healthcare costs for everybody who goes to the hospital or the clinic right now.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Sophie, and Mike will answer first.
This question is about weed legalization. Republicans, Libertarians, and Democrats in Wyoming have worked to legalize marijuana, but bills have never made it out, or they've never passed. What's your position on legalizing marijuana? Would you support medical, if not recreational?
I support recreational marijuana. I think the issue there is you have to make sure that you regulate it properly, right? So I support cigarettes being sold, but I don't support unregulated sales of tobacco to anybody, right? So we do need to ensure that the proper regulation is in place, but I think the quote-unquote war on drugs has failed, and marijuana legalization has happened in almost every state in the Mountain West except for us. It's past due time. I understand that it has social consequences, so does every vice. We just have to ensure that we regulate in the right way, and the only way that we can afford to do that properly is if we tax the people that want to use it and that can use it safely.
I agree with Mike there. My position is it's up to the voters. So far, the state of Wyoming hasn't said, yeah, let's do it. It's going to come eventually, I think. My beliefs have nothing to do with it. But if it is ever passed in the state of Wyoming, there needs to be a tax on that, and that goes to fire departments, law enforcement, EMS, those entities and those parts of our community. I don't think it doesn't have to, but that would be a good place to put that tax. And then also, it's another great avenue to gain income for education, help fund our schools.
We're moving right along. This is great. The next question will come from Caroline.
We are on to audience questions. Should taxpayers subsidize housing for teachers?
Man, that's a good one. I would love to see it, especially if we could incorporate the ideas that I'm having and the vision that I see, where we can build communities out of that surplus of money that we've given away through ski passes. It's essential that we retain teachers, and we're losing them like crazy. Every year we have a turnover of teachers that it never used to happen. And the biggest problem is housing. It's not that they don't like to teach, they don't like the community, or they don't like what they're teaching. They simply can't afford to live here. So if we could find a way through local funding and state funding to create housing opportunities for our teachers, I am all in favor of that.
Yes. Frankly, the question is, do we want our teachers to live in Teton County? Do we want to have teachers? I mean, I think Mr. McCollum said it correctly, is if we want to ensure that we have teachers at our schools, we need to be able to figure out a way to house them. And if we want to figure out a way to house them, I mean, it needs to be a housing solution that we can push for. And one of those ways that we can do it, it doesn't have to be the only way, is building housing as a county or as a school district. I mean, and that's one of the reasons I worked on that real estate transfer tax bill, is to ensure that, you know, the people who buy those second homes and then aren't here anyways are still going to make sure that we can ensure our kids that do live here and do grow up here get taught by very qualified teachers who will be able to live in Teton County.
Okay, this is our last question, I believe, and it will be another audience question. Similar to most Republican states, the Wyoming Republican caucus is becoming increasingly influenced by far-right, some would say extreme interests. Given the recent censorship and stripping of responsibilities of moderate top members in Cheyenne, how will you be able to gain influence and affect change on the key issues being discussed today?
Who goes first?
Who goes first on that?
Mike goes first.
So this is one where the Democratic caucus, I mean, it's a partisan question, so I think we have to talk about party politics, where the Democratic caucus is actually the swing vote here. When it comes to those that consider themselves the Freedom Caucus and those that don't consider themselves the quote-unquote Freedom Caucus, it's getting closer than it has ever been to where that balance of power within that caucus is. And so essentially, Democrats become that swing vote, and that enables us, by us I mean if I was reelected, as part of the Democratic caucus, to be part of the conversation of where policy change happens in Wyoming. And a lot of that happens especially in the first couple of weeks of the session, because that's when the legislative leadership of both the House and the Senate are chosen, and that is a full House vote. So every member of the floor, no matter what party they're in, whether they're an independent, a libertarian, a Democrat, a Republican, each of them have a vote on who the Speaker of the House is.
Watching the primaries unfold, we've actually gotten rid of several of the really extreme, far-right, troublemaking, pain in the rears that were there. They're no longer part of the equation. It's undeniable that Teton County itself is a little blue dot in a vast sea of red. The entire state is red. Somehow we have lost that ability to have dialogue, a meaningful dialogue, because it has become so partisan. But seeing who won the primaries in this recent election, I think we're on the right track. People are tired of politics as usual and want to find ways that we can move forward strategically and intelligently. And I think the opportunity is there. We've got the right people running and for the right reasons. And I think the future looks good.
Well, our candidates have been so concise. No more questions?
I know we're supposed to move on. Can we ask one last one?
We've got time.
Okay. That was a wonderful and rarely heard positive, upbeat last sentence you had there, Mr. McCollum. But we wanted to ask what issue you care deeply about that we did not ask about today.
Wow. We kind of touched on all my really important ones: the housing, the taxes, education. Environment, waterways, and conservation. We haven't touched on that. In me looking like I am, living where I am, often, get judged on how I view the environment and our open spaces. Hell, I've been a conservationist since about the time I was born. These mountains, these waters, the animals, I've been a steward of the state of Wyoming my entire life. These things are very important to me, and as a legislator, I will make sure that we, do everything we can to preserve and protect our open spaces, our waterways, and definitely our wildlife. Again, like energy, our wildlife and our mountains and streams are one of our biggest economies. We got to take care of those.
So we did talk about housing and we did talk about taxes, but one thing that we didn't mention was property taxes. So property tax is something that is happening in the property tax reform, I guess is how, or relief is how I would frame it. Is something that's happening in the Revenue Committee right now, which is a committee that I sit on. And there are a couple of different tracks, so we'll probably make some reform of some sort, but the way that I'm envisioning what will happen is we'll have some more short-term property tax relief to basically ensure that those that have lived here our whole life, their whole life, and those that have lived here a long time don't get kicked out of their homes because of rising property taxes. So the easiest way that we'll probably focus on that is expanding the eligibility for the property tax refund program so people can be eligible for that. The harder part is that our Constitution is pretty tight on how we deal with property taxes. So residential property taxes and commercial property taxes have to be the same rate because of our state constitution. And so figuring out how, if any reform that we should do on property taxes is the conversation we're having right now. And so I want all of your input in it. I will say that there has been consideration of both acquisition value and property tax caps. But what I really want to focus on is those that have lived here a long time and not also give a tax break to those that have just bought a really rich house and then their property taxes go up and their house is now a really richer house. I don't want to also give them a tax break. And so I worry that property tax caps might do that. It's just finding how do we target the relief to those that need it most and ensure that our community stays intact.
Great. So that's the end of our questions from media. Now the candidates will have an opportunity to summarize and present closing remarks. And Mike goes first.
It's been an honor to represent this community for 4 years. I don't know whether I deserve it or not, but I hope I have been a good servant to each and every one of you. Not all of our values all align all the time, but I do appreciate each of you giving me the chance and sending me to Cheyenne these last 4 years. I want to make sure that you know that I have an open door. My email is open, my text messages are open, my phone is open, my phone is on the legislative website, it's on my own website. You can reach out to me, we can sit and have dinner or lunch at Thai Plate or wherever. Happy to do that for anyone that wants it for any reason. The people who get elected, every single one of them, we're here to serve your interests, and that means being able to talk to you and listen to you. Whether or not we always make the decisions that necessarily align with what you want, that happens no matter what, no matter who gets elected. It's just ensuring that we listen to each and every one of your thoughts and take it in. So I do appreciate you electing me these last 4 years, and I do hope that you'll elect me for 2 more. Thank you.
Thank you guys for the opportunity. This was actually, you said it was going to be fun, and that was fun. Thank you, Mike. I enjoyed that. Again, I'm a local kid, born and raised here, been here my whole life, and I am very passionate about our community in this state. I sat idle and just kind of solved the world's problems from the couch for too long, and decided it was time for me to try to make a change and see if I can make a difference. I've learned through this process that Mike and I agree on a lot of the issues and a lot of the things that we've discussed. It's just a different way. How do we get there? How do we get the results that we want? And I think I bring a fresh, new perspective with some innovative ideas, and for good or bad, but being a Republican state, I think my voice will be heard better in Cheyenne. And I look forward to the opportunity, and I hope I've earned your trust and gained your vote. Thank you.